Hello and welcome to the A Matter of Principle podcast. I'm your host, Vito Quaglia, and today our guest is Mr. Frank Parente, a teacher and coach from Northeastern Pennsylvania. Frank teaches in the Wyoming Area School District and is also the head coach of the Pittston area girls softball team, a team that has been on quite a run. For the last few seasons, they've been the dominant team in Northeastern Pennsylvania, winning the state title 2 years ago in 2022 and also playing for it again this year in 2024, just coming up short for the 5A class title. Frank, welcome aboard. This is A Matter of Principle and you are the guest.
Vito, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Now we'll talk a little bit about sports, a little bit about school, a little bit about leadership. It's kind of a mixed bag. One of the things that we try to do is just have people dig up some memories of maybe their playing days or their school days and think about people that influence them, but then also what's going on in their life now and people that maybe they have some influence on or impact on, currently. I know you as a coach, naturally, you have influence beyond what you think with the players that you coach and also in the classroom, all the kids that you teach on a daily basis. So there should be a lot of things that you could draw from to not just talk about yourself, but also maybe what these kids are the differences. Maybe that's what we'll draw on, the differences of kids today versus the kids when we grew up. Also, one of the main things we do is try to get people to talk about relationships. And I know just from our friendship, I know the kinds of relationship that you build with your students and your student athletes. So this should be a very good conversation to have. One of the first things we'll talk about is softball. And like we just mentioned, you are the head coach of Pittston area, one of the best programs around in the state. And one of the best players on that outstanding team is Gianna Adams, probably the most dominant pitcher to come out of Pennsylvania in decades. Frank, just tell us a little bit about Gianna, not just as a player, but also as a young lady and as a student athlete.
She is just the most incredible girl you could ever meet. She's as great off the field as she is on the field, Vito. She's the assassin on the field. Like, she wants nothing more than to represent herself as the best player. It's an I'm better than you mentality. It's something that the two of us talk about a lot. When somebody looks at a plate, I want you to have the mentality that I'm better than you. And she has that. But then when the game's over, she'll be shaking hands with that girl with the biggest smile on her face. And she would actually want to talk to that girl. Like, if that girl was interested in talking to her, like, she's the girl you about your day. When she was a freshman, when I first met her, not first met her, but first started coaching her, I'd get to practice and she would ask me how my day was. Like, who does that as a freshman? She's just a 10. She's a 10 all around. And wow, I mean, she is, she's every coach's fantasy to have a player that could just change the game for any team. She's something.
Now, the impact that she had on your team, naturally, I mean, ridiculous amount of 800 strikeouts and a win-loss record that's just off the charts. But how did she interact with, the younger players, especially her senior year? I know that you had a lot of kids who, maybe weren't on that team, on the state championship run from a couple seasons ago. How did she see herself as the elder statesman? Did she accept that role naturally, or was that something she had to work towards?
She had to work toward it. So at the conclusion of her junior year, we lost to Abington Heights in the district final. And the two of us were the last two to leave the field. And we're in the dugout and she's upset. I'm, out of my mind too. And I'm like, gee, it's going to be very difficult next year because, we lost so many girls going into this year. We knew we were going to be extremely inexperienced going into this year. I'm like, I need you to step up as the leader of the team. It's a little outside her comfort zone. I mean, she's amazing leading by example, but to have to be vocal would be a change. And she's like, I'll do it. And Vito, did she ever? I mean, she was everything you could ask for. She led our workouts all the time. She was so encouraging to the girls. I mean, when you're a freshman and you walk by this larger than life Jenny Finch-like player and she's smiling and talking to you. Like, she just makes everyone feel good around her. And wow, I'm so proud of her for getting outside of her comfort zone, because being the vocal leader is outside of her comfort zone. But man, she did it just like everything else, as good as anybody else could do it.
And that must be, if you sit back for a second and think about, a couple characteristics that you said about her, that she's that assassin on the field. I mean, she had that dog in her, right? Like, she wanted to just obliterate the opponent when she's out there, in the circle. But then at the same time, you have to kind of switch gears and then be that, that friend to the, maybe the inexperienced teammate. And then that one, a kid makes an error. She's probably the kind of kid that the first one to give her a pat on the back and to give the reinforcement. So they're two different worlds. I mean, a lot of times you'd see real competitive kids stay with that, death stare when they go into the dugout or when they sit on the bench, and they can't turn it on or off. So for her to do that does say a lot about her makeup.
Yes. And I mean, her parents are fantastic. She was raised the right way. And, she's different. She's different in every way, shape, or form.
Well, all the great ones are. Well, here's a question about you as a coach then. So, not to say it's easy to coach great players, but there's a little bit less to worry about when you have a Gianna Adams out there. You kind of know what you're going to get. But then how do you go from, on a team of 20 some kids, there's going to be other kids who don't have that talent level, right? And you're going to have to be able to instruct them maybe a little bit differently than you do with Gianna. So how do you hold all your players accountable to that, that standard of excellence that you want in your program, but knowing that not everybody is going to respond, the way she would?
I mean, and that's another thing that you could look to Gianna for. These girls knew she was the best player of the team. They knew she's the best player around. So they became the best version of themselves. And I mean, that should be everybody's goal. Different in school and on the field. So being best version of yourself is something that everybody hears me say all the time. When you become that, well, that's a win. That's a win for everybody. And that's the mindset that I want everybody to have always.
Well, you opened the door to the next question I want to go into, and that's, teaching versus coaching. And, you hear that old maxim a lot of times, is the great coaches are great teachers and vice versa. But, when you sign up for a team, you're volunteering to go out for that team, right? Whether it's swimming or basketball, softball, whatever it is. So you know that you're going to have to stay after school later or get up earlier for workouts, whatever it is. But everyone has to go to school. It's mandatory that those students are in front of you on a daily basis. So what are the differences and similarities between how you coach and how you teach? Because your softball players want to be there, and maybe some of the kids in your classroom don't necessarily want to be there on a daily basis.
Well, that's, I would say this, there are so many more similarities for me. I love my job, teaching 5th grade. So I love the role of trying to win over every student. I mean, have I won over everyone? No, but I'm happy to say that I've won over most. And I try to get in the door, Vito. I'm like, if I can get the kids to not hate coming into my math class, I know I've won right there. And, same thing with softball. Like, I want to get them to want to come to practice. I want everybody to be the best version of themselves, like I said before. Desire to be great. Leave the classroom and leave practice being the best student you've ever been or the best player you've ever been every day. And that's my goal. I'm tired. I'm tired when I leave a day work, and I'm tired when I leave practice, because I try to give it all every day, and I try to get them. If I want them to be the best version of themselves, I have to bring it every day.
I mean, those of us who are, in the education profession kind of know that little secret that students definitely, their meter by which they judge whether or not the adults in their lives care is finely tuned. So they can, if you're dialing it in, if you're just there to get a paycheck, the kids know really quickly. So I think that, that energy and fire and passion you bring on a daily basis, they sense that. And I think that's probably why you get that best version of themselves so much. From our pre-interview questionnaire that you filled out, you did mention that someone that I worked with years and years ago, Mr. Phil Russo, was maybe your favorite teacher. What aspects of Mr. Russo's teaching and how he taught you guys do you take on your daily attempt to be the best version of yourself as a teacher?
I loved how Mr. Russo brought it every day with a smile on his face. I sat there every day and felt like, man, he loves his job. He's having so much fun doing it. And I'm sure there were days where he didn't want to be there, but I never knew it. I couldn't tell. And, history wasn't even my favorite subject. It wasn't even close to my favorite subject. And yet my ninth grade history teacher was the best teacher I ever had. I knew when I started teaching, I wanted to be successful. So I wanted to do it just like Mr. Russo did it. I try to bring it I want the students to leave there or be in my class and be like, boy, Mr. Parente really loves this stuff, or he's really into it. I patterned myself after Mr. Russo. I just tried to do it just like he did it. I figured if it worked for him and he was my role model, let me try the same thing. And I have to say it's been successful for me.
I have a very quick Mr. Russo story from my days at Wyoming area. I was probably my first year as a principal, young guy, didn't really know what I was doing, wet behind the ears, 31-year-old high school principal. And Mr. Russo was the president of the union. There was an issue.
Yes, he was.
There's an issue that came up, and I was going to have to talk to somebody about it. And he came in to see me. He closed the door and he said, listen, in 2 minutes, I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to bark at you and I'm going to yell at you and I'm going to be red in the face and I'm going to be talking all this union stuff because that's the job I have. But it's not personal. And afterwards, we'll talk again. And he walked back out and then he walked in with a teacher. And just like he said, he told me the way it was. And he told me about how, the things he was doing to protect his union member and all of that, went up and down me. And then the teacher was going to walk out the door and he held the door for the teacher and he turned and he winked at me. And he
I know that wink.
Right. So that was, his way of kind of helping a young principal through a situation, playing the role. But again, he brought that all the time. And I saw that, not
Always.
As a student, but, as someone who worked with him for a brief time. So I completely understand what he must have been like, for a whole school year. He was a great guy, great man.
And brilliant. So smart.
Was he, now what class did you have him for? What subject was it?
It was American history.
So you were probably a junior, probably?
No, I was a
freshman. Okay.
Yeah. Vito, was it? Yeah, it was American history. Yeah, because I remember. Yeah, American history, ninth grade. Yes.
So that must have been what, 1980?
1986, 85. Yeah.
A few years ago, just a few years.
A few years ago. Yeah.
So was it somebody like a Mr. Russo? Maybe some other people you had through the years that when you left high school, you knew you wanted to be a teacher, or was that something that developed as you were, going into other courses in college?
So I started, when I was at King, I was going to be an accountant, and I don't know, I didn't love it, but I was like, all right, I'm still going to do it. I started coaching basketball a little bit, just like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, and they had it was a little a weekend thing, and I loved it. I really did. So my mother, was a secretary at Wyoming area forever, said, hey, why don't you go be a teacher? And I'm like, I thought about it, and then I did it, and I went to see if King's had a secondary business, to maybe teach accounting or economics, and they didn't have a secondary program. Vito, talk about hitting the jackpot, because I ended up picking elementary education. A couple years later, King's College has secondary business. I'm so glad I haven't taught secondary business for the last 27 years, because I absolutely love teaching fifth grade. I love it. And I know I wouldn't have loved it as much. So I got lucky just by a couple of years.
Do the students that you have, do they know that you also coach at the rival school across the river, or they don't know that up to Parente?
They know, and I get razzed about it all the time. You know, I even had somebody ask me who I was up for when Wyoming area played Pittston area. And one of the kids in the class turned around and said, he has to root for Pittston. He's the coach. And then he turned back around. I laughed. I said, listen, I root for Wyoming area all the time for every game. Just one game, a year I'm rooting for Pittston. It's not easy, Vito. It wasn't an easy thing going to Pittston area.
No, and we've had, for those of you who don't know, Frank and I coached together on the staff. And there was, before you were on the staff, there was Rich Mazinski was on with us, and he was another Wyoming area guy. So have you guys come over, cross that bridge, and to coach at the rival it worked. I think one of the things that made both programs excel was that competitiveness. And then to have, it's a situation where, a lot of small towns in USA have that, where you have rival high schools and whatnot, but there's a lot of animosity and a lot of, competitive juices that fly around during one contest. But for the rest of the year, all the families intermingle and intermarry and everything else. So it's a very close thing. But there's a lot of bragging rights when you win that basketball game or that football game or that softball game, they bust on each other for the whole school. I think it's different too now, and from coaching travel, a lot of those kids from different schools play together during the year anyway. It's not like
it's a huge difference. It was never like that when we were growing up. Now these kids play with each other all the time on all sports with travel. Absolutely.
Now, speaking of travel and individualized coaching and lessons and things like that we didn't have when we grew up, do you think that is helping the student athletes because they could maybe, hone their skills earlier or maybe more targeted than we did, because we just learned by playing whatever sport was in season, right? You went outside and that's what you played. Do you see that as a help or a hindrance with today's student athletes?
It depends on what you're looking for. I am a fan of travel ball. So, travel ball is going to make you better. There's no doubt about it. Like, you find your passion, you find the sports you're good at, and you do all that extra against better competition, you're going to be better. No doubt about it. Who does it hurt? You're sorry for the kid who can't do it, who can't play travel. Because here's the thing. If you're only playing this season again, you're going against and you're competing against kids that are playing for, most of the year. It's tough. It's tough for those kids to compete at that same level. So, you feel sorry for the kids who can't do it or aren't fortunate enough to do it. But, it's a huge advantage to those who do.
Do you see for the student athletes that you coach, the ones who excel, the kids that are really successful, do you see the correlation that is always there in the classroom, that those kids are usually good students? Or do you think that it's 50-50? Some kids excel in both areas and some don't. What do you see as a coach? What do you think?
It's funny. I see it. It's different because I teach fifth grade. So I know some kids are really good athletes in fifth grade, but they're not mature enough in fifth grade to, know that how important it is to study and prepare. On the high school level, it does relate. Like, the students that are really busting their butt at practice and they get it and they want to be there and they want to be great and they want to be the best version of themselves, they're typically doing it in the classroom as well.
Do you think that competition on the field, do you think that's something that the kids see as a stepping stone to, I know you're a big, you bring up, you like to give speeches and lecture and really give them a lot of background information about why you're coaching to do certain things. But do you think as 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that you're coaching, do they see the connection between this is going to help me as, post high school and college and get job world? Or do you think that that's not something they get yet? When you talk to them and you interact with them, what do you think that does for them?
You're saying I'm talking to the students the players I'm coaching or the students I'm
Yes.
teaching?
The ones you're coaching.
I think the ones I'm coaching get it for sure, when you talk about things. But, a lot of my speeches when it comes to your life and, the harder you work in school, the easier your life will be out of school. Most of that stuff comes from when I'm teaching. When I'm coaching, I'm so focused on getting them to be the best version of themselves on the field. I don't have that life conversation with them that much, other than every time you're out here on the field, you could make a memory that you'll never forget. Which is, there's so many texts that you make during your day, you'll never remember them, or so many conversations you could have, you'll never remember. But there's something you could do on the field that you'll never forget.
Someone once said to me, and I don't know if I agree with this, I want your take on it. Someone once said that with coaching girls and coaching boys, it's different. He said, girls need to feel good about themselves to win, and boys need to win to feel good about themselves. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, see, it's tough for me because I never coached boys. I have 2 daughters who are my life, and I practice with them and all the time like a lunatic. And so all I ever coached was girls. So I can't really say, what it's like to coach boys, although it would be interesting to do it. But yeah, that's a tough one for me to compare the two.
What about the chemistry? Like, how important is chemistry with, I mean, you have talent, that's great. But then tell me about the importance of chemistry when it comes to a winning program.
Chemistry is huge. Especially like the best example of that would be with this year's team in 2024. They were a group of inexperienced girls. We knew it was going to be a difficult year to, get to where maybe you hope to go with a pitcher like Gianna Adams. But the girls got along so well. They loved being together. Kids that didn't even really know each other until softball season started. And now they're hanging out. They're like best friends after the season. That's just a few months long, so chemistry means so much. It also helps, like we said before, like you have somebody like Gianna Adams smiling at that freshman walking by or asking them how their day was, make them feel larger than they are. It was this 2024 team speaks volumes for how much chemistry means to a team.
And I, living in the area and knowing, some of the kids that came up through that program, I do think you had some players that maybe played beyond their ability, or at least matured quicker than you might have anticipated, knowing how they were when they were in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, things like that. And kids that step, on the big stage, and probably because of the, that contagiousness of, being around a Gianna Adams and other kids like that, and they kind of raise their game to another level. One little tidbit, and I think I'm right on this, but you'll definitely know because you know stats better than I do. I think in the last 9 years, and if you take the COVID year out when there was no championship, I think the Pittston area program for those 8 years of the 9 were either silver medal or gold medal at the district level. Is that true?
Yeah, well, no. The unfortunately, Gianna's freshman year, we lost in the quarterfinal.
Well, that's right, to Rick Scranton, because they had Butkus. They had a money pitcher in themselves.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, that was a big win I think for Pittston area, because for 365 days after that loss, there were a lot of people who wanted to overcome it. And, it turned into a state title the next year.
Well, and that would have run. I mean, that undefeated season, the city, the town, the whole region, being behind you guys, that was really and I didn't go, I'll tell you this, for a guy who was involved with the program before that, I didn't see you guys play in person at all during that year. And because I'm a wacko when it comes to not messing up mojo, I didn't go to any game. I would listen. I would follow on Twitter. I would do a lot of stuff. My daughters were going, to the playoff games, and they're like, Dad, I said, I can't. I didn't go once because I couldn't get there early in the season. I'm like, if I go and they lose, it's going to be because of me. Like, as crazy as that sounds. So I watched from afar.
I 100% believe in that, and I thank you for not coming because I am very superstitious.
But how was that? I mean, explain that, because I've never been on an undefeated season, undefeated team as a player, as a coach. What's that like? Is there pressure that you're like, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to do? I mean, during the season, you could lose a game and you're still okay. But then once the postseason comes, that's it. The next loss, you go home. But when you're riding that kind of wave, when you realize what's going on, do you feel it in the moment, like a pitcher with a no-hitter, or maybe you just don't even realize it? What was that like?
That's a great question. I mean, I told the girls a lot when we got to the playoffs, like how, it's so special to be undefeated. So appreciate it, enjoy it. And that's the thing we have to do to maintain it, because everybody loves an undefeated team. I mean, Vito, think back to when Mike Tyson was boxing, and before he lost, it was the biggest thing in the world to go watch a Mike Tyson fight on.
Yep.
So everybody loves that undefeated team. I can't say I felt pressure. I wasn't that nervous about it because every game I go into, I want to win. So it's just in that moment. I tried to use the undefeated thing as motivation for the girls to be like, hey, let's face off.
That's one thing I think teachers and coaches get to experience. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're undefeated or if you have some losses or whatever it is, but that idea of this is where we were at the beginning of the season or the beginning of the school year. This is where we want to be. This is the hard work, the grit we need to do to get there. And then at the end, you kind of sit around and you can kind of figure out, how'd we do? And you have your war stories about, if you're working in a cubicle somewhere, or if you're, people working from home you don't have that sense of progress, and I think that is definitely unique to what we do in education and in coaching. What were there things in that season that were different, like in that road to progress, that path to where you were going, that were in any other season that you coached, or was that just like a different regular season for you guys?
There was a mindset issue that I didn't like at the beginning of that year. I think the girls thought other teams were better than them. And I don't just mean local teams. I just mean teams out there. And Vito, it drove me crazy that they felt that way, because I knew they were super talented, and you're playing against girls your age. So I would hate to have them think that somebody's better than them. So I went home from practice that night, because there was one specific day that really, really got to me. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to blow up their phones right now. We have a team app, and I blow it up a lot with speeches and things like that. And I said, I gave this long thing, and in it I said, I want you to fear no one. So every time you hear me say fear, you have to scream no one. And if I put it in the app and I type fear, you have to send back no one. So that was our big learning. That to me was a big part of our season that year, that fear no one. And it was our saying. It's on our rings. The coaches got rings for that year, and it has fear no one on it, because it was definitely a hurdle that I think we had to climb over, but the girls did it for sure.
Do you think that mental toughness that you would have to build for that, what's more important, physical ability or mental toughness when it comes to success on the field? Or do you think they're equal?
I love them both. I love mental toughness in everything you do. I mean, physical ability is huge. Let's put it this way. Gianna Adams' physical ability is incredible. her, she was the best pitcher by far her senior year. She was mentally so much tougher than she ever was. And she was always mentally tough, like her sophomore year on, she was so very, very tough mentally. But Vito, I think mental toughness and physical, I think you need them both to be 25-0. I think you have to have players on your team who have both, to go 25-0 and win a state championship.
And not to mention, everyone's got to stay healthy, and it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of luck here and there. I mean, there's so many little things that can derail you. You could have the best team and everything else, and somebody has mono or somebody twists an ankle. It's crazy little things. So it was really like a magical year on so many levels, not just, the kids being great kids and you guys doing a bang up job coaching. It's just everything kind of met and that's why I think you really captured the hearts of everybody around when it happened. It was fun to watch from the outside, but I know for you guys, it must have been like you're, just floating, especially, when you won that game and the way that everywhere you looked, everybody was celebrating you guys. It was really cool to see. And I'm glad, you guys were part of that. And I think you from talking to the kids who played and the parents and things like that, like, everyone appreciated it. No one took it for granted. And it's probably because of the way you guys talked about it all year. There wasn't any kind of, they didn't think they were bigger than the moment, but they weren't afraid either, I guess, because of that fear no one thing. So it was really, really magical. Now, what's going off that, because that's not going to happen all the time. It's not going to happen all the time on the field. It's not going to happen all the time in the classroom. But what kinds of things do you think matter in 2024 in the classroom? Like, what things now that we didn't have to deal with as students, that we didn't have to deal with at the beginning of our careers? What do you think are the biggest challenges and obstacles for student athletes and for classroom students in this version of whatever reality is? When you can bring up technology or, just the social media aspect or everything under the sun. But what are the glaring differences that you see now as a teacher and a coach?
Discipline, as far as being able to put your phone down and do the work, study, put your phone down so you could concentrate more. I mean, Vito, I know when I was in school, I had a hard time like having TV on while I was studying and things like that, because I just find myself watching the TV. I can't imagine having a cell phone and trying to study, So that's definitely like something that has to be really difficult for students nowadays and athletes, because think about when we were it's like all the pickup games we played, like we were always out playing all the time. That just doesn't happen anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media. Like they're exposed to so many things that it's more interesting for them, and it's hard to get 10 kids together or 6 kids together to go play a pickup basketball game, because there's just more going on. It's a lot, I would say, right now for students and athletes than it was when we were growing up.
Well, and that's the connectivity, I guess, the connectedness of, having that phone in your hand all the time and having all those, whether they're invisible or wireless, but the connection to how many likes on Instagram and how many followers over here, that kind of thing that kids are unfortunately using to, define who they are. But talk about a different kind of connectiveness. How do you get your students in the classroom, your athletes on the field? How do you find ways to connect to them individually so you can, help make them the best versions of themselves? What do you do, as a coach and a teacher to connect with your kids?
As a teacher, I just I give them information and I try to get to really understand how important their education is. And, and you take that, and I try to teach with a ton of energy every day. I bring it every day. And, you try to get them to buy in and Vito, if you get them to be like, I think this guy's a little crazy. Like he's nonstop, but you know what? I believe him. And I think it's important to study for this test or want to do good on this test. You know, I'm not just doing it for my parents. I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for my teacher. I'm doing it for me. And, as for the athlete, it's the same thing. It's like, bring it every day. Want to be the best version of yourself every day. And I say these things all the time. And, I do think it sinks in with so many of them, especially the ones that want to be great. And, that's something I'm proud of. And I love seeing the success stories out there with every student.
Well, student athletes can succeed, if they put the hard work in and they have the ability that they were blessed with and they build on it, they can be successful. But can we make leaders, or is that something that you have to be intrinsically motivated to do? Wait, what do you think? Do you think leaders evolve, or do you think people are born to be a leader?
I think for the most part, you're born with it. You just know how to do it. It's a gift. I do think if you're willing to, I think there are people that that you could groom. You could give them the information and tell them, hey, if you do this or if you say this, you're going to get others to follow you. You're going to get others to do it. So I do think you could steer certain people into being leaders, but they could never be the born leader. The born leader is just different.
And is that something that every successful team you've been around, whether it's a coach or, just watching, a favorite team of yours or whatever, do you think that the success is directly connected to how much leadership is there? Like, do you think it doesn't really matter? Do you think there could be leaders on teams that stink? What do you think?
I do think there could be leaders on teams that stink, but look at our state championship team from 2022. You have Tori Parra and Sage White, like two different kinds of leaders. Tori was more of the leader by example, and Sage is the one that'll say something to you. But I'm telling you, without them, we're not winning without Gianna Adams. Like you can't win a state title without Gianna Adams. But we needed everybody else as well. But with Tori and Sage being the leaders on the team, man, if anybody didn't want to be there, you couldn't act it. You couldn't show it, because the two senior leader captains on our team wanted to be there, and everybody had to just suck it up every day because of them. Those two will always be special to me.
You only had the two seniors there, so they're only a couple of years into college. I was thinking if you had more seniors.
I did have more seniors that year. Yes. Skylar Borthwick was also a captain on the team. Yep. Great kid, great player for us. Gianna Moran had one of the most important at-bats in the history of Pittston area. So they were fantastic players and seniors on our team.
I will say this, and I was going to think about some of the articles that were written this year about your team on their run and how they did a really nice job of like calling up some role players, kids that you didn't hear about at the beginning of the year, and they were talking about how successful they were in different things. That's for anyone who doesn't understand, Northeast PA, for a long time, we were very lucky that we had several newspapers and many of them really focused on high school sports and sports in general, because it's kind of, what people in Northeast PA, you wake up in the morning back when print media was a big deal, and you had your coffee and you read about sports and you'd go to work and you'd argue about the game the night before and all that. But with print media dying out, and with some of the guys, I think like Joe B. Floss, who did an outstanding job of covering high school sports, the guys down here that did a great job, Matt Pafano, I'm trying to think of a couple other guys. Without them and really kind of celebrating these kids, you can't do the same on Instagram and Twitter, things like that. When reporters would come and interview the kids and really celebrate them and their families, that was special. And I'm sad that that's kind of gone away. Do you see that as well?
I don't, Vito, because Tom Fox from the Citizen's Voice, he does so much to, you know,
Fox has stepped up big time. You're right. He's with all the,
celebrate our girls, and like he just does an amazing job. He is always there. You know, during the state run, I saw Urzar all the time and Tom Robinson all the time, and I still see John a lot. You know, and Kevin Carroll's around. So I do think they are doing a good job still,
that's
getting
good.
out there and talking about the girls as much as they could.
That's good, because there's nothing like, that.
Tony Kaleo
Yes.
does a great job. Yeah.
But when you have, and again, that for people who don't know, the Pittston area, Wyoming area, the two towns kind of shared that paper. And for a lot of
Right.
decades, the Sunday Dispatch would come out, the Pittston Dispatch, and there'd be tons of stories about all the kids on both sides of the river and, celebrating everything they did. And you hate to see if that stuff ever dries up and goes away, because so much of that when you're a teenager, if they just feel like they're seen, right? Whether it's seen by the teacher or seen by the coach or somebody in the community, that could just be that one thing that keeps them going, or, lifts them up to that next level. And you never want to see any of that go away. So we talked about leadership. We talked about, some influence, some impact, people that, in your life that had impacts on you. I know another thing you referenced in your pre-interview stuff, your dad. Your dad had major impact on you, as most dads do. What did you learn from your father?
My father just taught me to think before I speak, because, I'm sometimes the type of person I'm excitable, and sometimes I'll just want to say something, and, my dad's like, hey, think about it before you say it. And, so he taught me that discipline that you need, so he's definitely always there for me, always in my corner, my biggest fan. And
I know you talked about your daughters and how much they mean to you. And I know you do a lot with them. What do you think it's like when they see you and, they see you coaching, they see, you interact with the kids in the classroom, things like that. What do you think they like? Do they really know, Frank the coach and Frank the teacher, or they just really know Frank the father?
They know it all, because I taught them in school.
Okay.
I had them in my classroom, which was great. They're both teachers.
Oh, so I guess you got a little influence on them.
Yeah. So, I know they know me, the teacher. They definitely know me, the coach, because I coached Jessica in high school and in travel. Lauren, I just drilled. I practiced with her all the time. Now, Lauren was a field hockey player. Jessica played softball. So we were just always practicing to be the best. I mean, was I hard on them? Yeah, really hard on them. And Jessica definitely knows the coaching part, because she's one of my assistants, and I love having her there.
Do you think that's something that came easier they kind of saw their dad and realized and probably heard you talk around the dinner table, things like that? Or did they go into teaching, later? Like, did they go to school like you did for accounting and then, change their mind up, things like that? Or did they know from the time they were little that, hey, I want to be a teacher like dad?
I think they decided, and I think they knew in high school that there was a good chance. Oh, Jessica knew for sure that she wanted to teach math or do something in the math field. And Lauren, it wasn't until she was in college that she was like, I want to be a teacher. And I'll tell you, Jessica loves it so much. Lauren was the one that I didn't think was going, because she was hesitant about wanting to be a teacher. But boy, let me tell you what, she student taught this year, and the classes she observed, and she absolutely loved it. Like, she's like a total, like, talk about somebody that I was unsure of. Now it's like, wow, she just really loves it. So I'm thrilled for both of them.
Does Lauren think that she would like to coach too, or does she coach, or is that not?
She doesn't. She doesn't. I don't know if she'll get there with the coaching. She might, but I'm not sure she's ready to do it yet.
Well, you never know, Coach. I think anybody who watches you and sees the kind of energy that you bring 24/7, it's infectious. So, and I just know from a little part of, when I saw, but I can't imagine living in the same house and seeing Frank on 24 hours a day must be quite the experience.
And I have to tell you, like the other person would be Steve Mytych, who was a big part of that. Just somebody my age who I started coaching with when Jessica was say 10, 11 years old, and we were coaching the All-Star team together. And let me tell you what, that guy is the most competitive person you will ever meet. The hardest worker. Vito, he would work the night shift, and after the night shift, we would have all-star practice. That was supposed to be from like 9 to 11, and we'd end up staying there till 12:30, 1 o'clock. Then we would go to his house, and he'd have everybody over. He'd cook out at his house. Then after that, we would go do another practice, and then he'd go to work. And I'd be like, Mytych, you didn't even sleep today. The guy didn't care. Vito, I'll tell you, he had such an impact on me with coaching. I always knew how much I loved to win. And coaching wasn't something that, I was definitely going to do. But when I became a head coach, I'm like, I'm doing it like Mytych. I love to win, and I know how hard you have to work to be great. So he had a big part of this too.
Well, explain preparing to win. How important is that? The preparation.
It's such an advantage if you do it. I knew when I became a head coach that it wasn't just going to be, hey, we're just going to practice and become the best version of ourselves. I wanted to make everybody we played against the worst version of themselves. So I studied every player that we played against, every person. I tried to find a weakness in every player. And when you have a gift like Gianna Adams, she could help me execute the plan. I can't do it without her, but together we were definitely a great team.
Now, can you sustain that competitive energy and that will to win and that will to prepare, and that it just seems like there has to be a time where you go into hibernation for 4 or 6 weeks and, don't think about anything competitive, and just, maybe you're painting some pictures or you're doing some origami, or is there another version of Frank where things calm down and he isn't worried about, the trying to be the next great whatever? Or is this you all the time?
I'm trying it currently. I've never done it. Since I became the head coach, it's been a 365 day, 24 hours a day focus. Am I thrilled that I'm wired that way? Absolutely not. Am I thrilled I'm not a smell the roses? Absolutely not. I wish, I'm jealous of people who could multitask. I think I'm horrible at it. I knew in this past August, that I had to change a little bit, because I just wish, again, it's a flaw. I believe it's a flaw because I just can't shut down.
Well, there's some things, sometimes you look at situations where greatness means there's a sacrifice somewhere else, right? If you're so consumed with one thing, then naturally something else is going to suffer. So I think that's the biggest challenge for everybody who's competitive, or who's an alpha, or, who's always striving to be great, is finding that balance, because somewhere along the line, it's going to catch up eventually. And, you just don't have that much all the time. And you've been lucky. For as long as I know you, this is you have that energy everywhere. And it's really not fake. Some guys turn it on, turn it off. This is just how you are. And it's a lovable quality. Trust me. But it's just one of those things where, I don't know. I'm opposite. I kind of have, I don't have a great attack. If I see a squirrel, like, or a shiny object, sometimes I'll just go and pay attention to that. So I don't have that. And I think that's something where I think I need to work on is having that discipline to stay focused on one goal for a longer period of time. Where I think maybe you and I should spend time together and rub off on each other a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah. I wish I could focus on other things. Like I just focus on those main things that I'm fixated on. And, I have a bit of an addictive personality for sure. And it's funny. I was out to eat with the Adamses last night and, it came up. I said, I just have an addictive personality, and everybody at the table goes, no, not you, so it's me. And it's just, something I'm trying to work on.
well, Coach, I will say this for as much as you see yourself that way, your impact on the young people that you interact with. I mean, I was an administrator in the district where you were a teacher, so I know you as a teacher. I've coached alongside you. I've coached against you. I've watched you as a fan, Coach. So I know that you're one of the guys that get it right. And the idea behind this podcast title, A Matter of Principle, I mean, it's a play on words with principle and, my job as a principal, but it's that idea that there's one right way to do something. Now I know there's more than one right way to do things, but I think the way you go at it, with your attention to detail and your attention to, communicating with your students and with your players, and the consistency. I think if nothing else comes from this discussion we had is the consistency in everything you do, and bringing that kind of contagious positive energy is the secret. If there's a secret to your success, I think really that's it. It's just communication and consistency and that positive energy. And kudos to you. I think you've done an outstanding job in your career. I mean, 27 years as an educator is nothing but brilliant for me. I mean, because that is not an easy gig, and to do it for 3 decades is awesome. And then, what you've done with the student athletes has been tremendous. So I wanted to give this opportunity for you to tell a little bit about yourselves and celebrate a lot of the things that you've done and a lot of the people that have made an impact on you in your life. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to talk with us, and hopefully down the road we can have you on again as a guest. But Coach Frank Parente, I really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Vito, thank you so much for having